You'll see arrears coming through, and we do provide prospective payments to help give that cushion as they find their stability. So you could say that that scenario is still going on with arrears.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll add one thing to that too,
Sure.
which is actually from the CNHA and Catholic Charities team, which is most recently we're seeing an increase in utility arrears, and they're fairly large utility arrears. So a family can apply only for utility arrears if they so choose. We cannot pay prospective utility payments, but when a family comes to us with that bill, from HECO or Board of Water Supply or whoever, we can process that as an arrears payment and send that directly to the utility for them. But that has, in our last round of funding, has been, something that the team has noted.
Okay, thank you. The $33 million accounts for 17% of the second tranche. I know you mentioned that 93 million has already been spent in the second tranche. That leaves 72 million left in the second tranche. So one of my concerns is, as mentioned earlier from Councilmember Tupola, that what is the long-term strategy? Because at some point this money is going to run out, and these families, what happens to these families once the money runs out? And again, and second question is, how long will the 33 million last? How many weeks will that take us through?
So, Chair Waters, you ask an incredibly important question, and there's a philosophical component to this as well. Our position is that based on the data, there's still a very real need right now. And so it merits the infusion of money. At the same time, OER is taking an enormous undertaking in various other areas in terms of developing economic growth and economic resurgence. So the hope is that with every other effort that the state, and we're working very closely with Governor Green's office in working closely with the state, that we can bring back that economy to a point where this is not as necessary. But you raise a very, very good question that I don't know that any of us have a very clear answer to necessarily. But what we do know based on the data that CNHA and CCH has shared with us today is that right now there is still a need, and we do still find value in this. But that's a very good question, Chair. And to your question of how long this 33 million will last, I'll turn over to Director.
Okay, great.
Okay, so 2 points I wanted to make. Thanks, Kuhio, for pointing this out. We do have 2.5 million that was set aside from the ERA2 funding from the U.S. Treasury that Catholic Charities and CNHA today are executing for housing stabilization funds. So that provides funding for other organizations outside Catholic Charities and CNHA to provide mediation relief. It provides funding for their organizations to do case management with the families that, seem to be willing and want to have some help. There are financial management classes, and I feel like I'm forgetting one other category, but the effort with the housing stabilization funds is to be able to work more closely and more in depth with the families that have been having a hard time. Otherwise, this funding has strictly been dedicated to processing it and in terms of administration costs and getting it out the door in terms of rental relief. That is why we've had such a strong partnership with these organizations that have other wraparound services built in, as well as a really strong partnership that started from the get-go with the Hawaii Community Foundation to provide them some capacity building, and $2 million that has been spent over the last 2 years from the Castle Foundation to stand up the Ko'olau Housing Hui that has helped folks from Hau'ula to Waimanalo, and they have, times 100 increased the number of families that have been able to apply because of the in-person support. So we think that this funding, when we open up the portal, it'll allow those recertifying families to get an additional 3 months of prospective relief, which gives them that time, to get an extra job or et cetera. And the 5,800 new families would be able to get relief for the first time. So I wanted to point out, too, that some of the other programs that OER is standing up, we think will be very complementary. On January 30th, the mayor announced yesterday with the Chamber of Commerce that we'll be rolling out $10 million in business recovery grants. So we hope this can help to stabilize jobs that are already out there and make sure that there are more available in industries that were impacted by the pandemic. Number two, thanks to you, Council Chair Waters, we have $5 million in workforce development that we're nearing execution with the University of Hawaii to help those in hospitality jobs transition to other more stable areas. And we also have $2.5 million for green jobs. So we're really excited to execute on that. And all of our partners have been involved in various webinars, trainings, and other outreach to make sure that we help our families to get access to the job training that's available. There's the EDA Good Jobs Challenge money that is at the university. There's city money that will be going towards Oahu Back to Work, so more of our families can get a higher paying, higher skilled job. And additionally, we're working on a few other programs. Ag grants will be rolling out hopefully later this month to the first group of funded farmers for that $3 million to stimulate more local food in our food system here.
Thank you. I was just doing the math on my phone. If you take $33 million and divide it by the 15,500 that we're currently serving, that amounts to $2,200 per applicant. Mm-hmm. Or if you take the $33 million and divide it by the 5,800 new applicants, that's $5,689 per applicant. And again, I know each applicant has different requirements, but my point is that this isn't really, it looks like it's a Band-Aid, right? And how, the real question is, how do we stop the bleeding, right? Because my question earlier was, how many weeks will this, or months, will the 33 million help? Because at some point, like I said, if there's $72 million left out of the, what was it, 390 odd million, if there's 72 million left, I mean, are we gonna end up spending the entire 72 million on this? I mean, it's quite possible, because if it really is only gonna provide 6 weeks of relief, I mean, just it's helpful to go plan forward, right?
So prospective relief is for 3 months, and the maximum amount that a family would receive would be $6,000. The average amount for a new family is around $8,000 of funding. So it's different, as you said,
sure,
for every applicant. But what I wanted to point out was that this is an emergency program. OER is doing this program due to the COVID emergency. The city's long-term strategy on helping families who are having a hard time paying their rent, who are homeless and need to transition into housing, and our affordable housing strategy is vested with Anton, Daryl, and the team at the Department of Community Services. This is an emergency program in response to families having a hard time digging their way out from the pandemic. It was not written, it was not, created by the Treasury with the same kinds of rules and requirements for participating families that a typical HUD program would. And so again, I just want to emphasize that in response to the pandemic, this funding has shown to have been complementary to the programs that the Department of Community Services runs. it has been complementary to the eviction moratorium in keeping families housed. And so we think that there are families still having a very hard time. And we think the data that we've showed today, and probably your own anecdotal evidence, you know that. So what we'd like to do is to be able to continue to help the families that are, working with Catholic Charities and CNHA today, and provide that housing stability and that job training and the other services provided by the Department of Community Services to help families get back on their feet and have, a stronger, more resilient economic plan in their household, and then also for our island.
I completely understand that, and your argument is logical and makes sense. But at the same time, I acknowledge that it is an emergency, but one of the things that you're supplanting or taking away from is number one on the appendix, which is to provide grants to nonprofit organizations who are going to help inpatient services and address substance abuse and mental health issues for homeless people. That is equally an emergency. And I'm just curious, that's part of what we're deciding here, right? Do we take away the $5 million from this, which is apparently still in review? Because in my mind, again, and I know I'm repeating myself, like, how do you weigh the two emergencies? Because we get complaints every day about homeless people with mental illness everywhere. Like, literally. My kids are growing up, all of our kids are growing up, seeing this, and it's the norm now. And it's really disturbing, because when we were growing up here, we never used to see that. So what's the difference? And I know we're doing things, and Daryl's here, and the city's doing their best, but at the same time, we're taking away money from this very, very important goal as well.
Chair, thank you for raising that question and that issue, and maybe we can talk this through and come to an understanding. So when we first put forward this resolution, we didn't identify projects. We didn't want to be presumptuous in terms of how the council wanted to reprogram things. And then we had a further discussion. We were asked to offer some projects that could be used for this $33 million purpose. So we focused.
Well, the ordinance actually requires it, right? Section 17 of the budget bill.
Right. So we identified projects that had a relationship to homelessness, so that seems somewhat appropriate. But in terms of, so 2 points. One is, just because these projects have been identified as projects which are going to be used towards the $33 million, my understanding, and if the council could please clarify and correct me, that doesn't mean those projects disappear and end up with zero balances. It means that we would still work on those and come to you and say, we would like to do this project for this amount, or that we can still execute. That's my understanding. And number two, the Treasury delineated these monies as flexible monies that were meant to be used in a flexible manner in emergency. So this is what I think collectively administration and council is trying to grapple with and struggle with, because that's a very good question, Chair. I don't have a good answer for you, except that that project does not disappear. We still work on it. We still will try to execute. But at some point, you're absolutely right. Something is going to have to go by the wayside if we do move forward with this $33 million.
I just want to point out that Appendix A has 44 projects, and thank you for the update, because it says estimated cost, status, and it looks like out of the 44 projects, maybe 5 are being done. Based on previous testimony, there's about $72 million left. Does the administration intend to now look at Appendix A to use that remaining $72 million?
So we will continue to look at Appendix A and the individual projects and move towards executing the ones that are possible to execute. Does that answer your question, Chair? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
Well, most of them say in review, right? And 5 out of the 44 say in progress. So I'm just curious, going forward, since if we approve this resolution, there's $72 million left.
Yes, sir.
Is the administration going to come back and rather than in review, tell us that you're actually trying to accomplish what was in Appendix A?
Correct. So whenever an Appendix A project goes through the ad hoc committee and then goes into progress, we send a letter to the council letting you know that it's improved and it's in progress. So we would continue to inform the council in our weekly letters as well as our monthly report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions?
Chair?
Okay, first off, Councilmember Said first, and then Councilmember Tupola.
For the Deputy Managing Director, Krishna, well, I think what we're talking about this morning is a very sobering dilemma that all local governments and state governments will be facing within the next 2 years. I would hope that the administration would be creative, as an example for Amy, that these particular data that we have on the 5,800 plus families that I've collected, can you give us a breakdown? Is it a mother by herself with 3 children? Or is it husband and wife and 2 children, as far as your report in regards to 87% of families earn at or below half of Honolulu's area median income, which is less than $63,000 a year for a family of 4. So that particular income of $63,000, is it both a husband and wife, a mother and father total income? Or is it just an individual, the breadwinner being the husband? My point is that the general public doesn't understand. This is just a welfare payment for rent and utility. Because once we draw down on this, where are we going to find the resources to carry them through?
So to clarify,
Yes.
area median income is calculated based on the income of every member of that household. So a household of 4 could be 4 adults, and it could be all their income. A household of 4 could be 1 mom and 3 kids. A household of 8 could be grandparents, parents, auntie. That income of all those 8 members must be shared with Catholic Charities and CNHA to qualify, to income qualify for this program. You mentioned 87% of the households that have received funding through this program are actually at 50% of the area median income, right? That is lower than our average. We can go up to 80%, right? We could go up to 80% of the area median income, which is higher than that. But our point is that a majority of these funds, 87%, that's nearly 90%, are going to our most low-income households, okay? On top of that, again, this program is not the answer.
Right.
This program, the funding goes to landlords and property managers who are keeping these homes, these units in basically affordable housing. They're keeping it in housing for our local families. If we hadn't been providing this rent relief for the last 2 years for some of these units, what would have happened? I'm glad we don't know. I'm glad we don't know today. So to think that we have been spending, or we hope to spend, up to $308 million to maintain the housing for our most low-income families to stay housed, that's also what this funding is doing, right? So if you want to call it welfare, you can call it welfare, but we think it's a part of a strategy to keep people housed. A home is a foundation for a job. A home is a foundation for a kid to go to school, right? A home is a foundation where you have a healthy meal, et cetera.
Well, I'm happy you're sharing this particular story, Amy, because the general public needs to hear this. If the general public doesn't need to hear this, they're looking at it from a different perspective. My question will be next, like what the members have asked. Where do we go from here when this fund is exhausted? You call a spade, you know, I'm just trying to balance the county's budget on behalf of the chair and this council and the administration. And that's why I'm just trying to figure out, excuse me, where is the state's participation? Are these individuals qualifying for SNAP, supplemental, aid, nutritional aid? Or they can qualify for food stamps, they can qualify for rental assistance. I don't know where we're headed for, but I am concerned because in the next year and a half to 2 years, these monies will be gone. I can personally feel, Madam Chair, that for the next 2 years, this county and this state will not get any federal relief with what has happened in Capitol Hill. And that's the State House of Representatives. So what I'm getting at, okay, this is great, and you have really helped the residents of District 5. I want to say thank you. But I'm more concerned about the out years now, after we exhaust, if we agree with the 33 million, after we exhaust that, where else do we go to find the resources to continue? If you're saying it's emergency, great. But that emergency will probably continue on in the out years. So that's why the dependency of what we have done creates this craving that, Amy's going to be able to provide us with more funding for the rent utility. But I hope the landlords also begin to appreciate and see what this program is all about.
And you mentioned the state in this equation. I would be remiss if I did not let at least Councilmember Wire know that about $100 million of the funds that the city and county has expended came from the state of Hawaii's emergency rental assistance funding. They were very generous, and they also wanted these funds executed at the county level, where we're a little bit closer to the families that we're trying to serve. So we appreciate the state. We meet with them regularly. We meet with HHFDC, we meet with the Office of Federal Awards Management, and we meet with the Office of Budget and Finance to talk about this program and our execution of it. Additionally, at another hearing on Thursday, I'll be happy to outline our economic revitalization strategy in terms of the use of state and local fiscal recovery funds and the plans that we have to support our families and businesses going forward.
Thank you, Director. Okay, we have Councilmember Say. Okay, Councilmember Tupola as well as Councilmember Wire.
For Deputy Director Krishna, please. So a few days ago, I believe the city was soliciting for a homeless position. Maybe it's a director, or are you guys still in the search? Could you update us? Because I think part of the question we're asking is for big picture. I heard that you said that there's a draft in the pipeline. We'd love to see that sooner than later. Who is taking the lead?
So thank you for that question, Councilmember Tupola. The solicitation you're referring to, I believe, is for the Executive Director for the Office of Housing. So that we reposted. We thought we had a candidate, but we reposted, and so we're actively searching for that individual. In the meantime, the the spear of this effort has been two-pronged. One is that we have Craig Hirai now at DPP, so he's our Chief Strategy on Housing. And we've been very fortunate that the DCS director, who came from the Office of Housing, has devoted a significant portion of his time to working on the homelessness issue as well. And so he has taken the laboring oar on that first draft of that homelessness plan. So he is doing double duty for us right now.
Okay, so he's taking the lead then.
He was. Well, he is. And now we have a draft that's circulating, so we're working on that.
Okay, because I do believe that one of the things we've tried differently in my community is that for the past 10 years, the Partners in Care report has showed that we've stayed around the same number of homeless every year. Now, that means that we're deterring, right? So that means that the number's not getting larger. So people are deterring from homelessness. However, the number hasn't gotten smaller. And one of the problems that we saw was that we are taking people from A to B or A to C, but not A to Z. So a lot of the programs are to help for a few steps, but it's very, very difficult. I mean, I've helped a handful of homeless this past year. And then once we get them to step C or D, there's many steps left, right, to kind of keep them in the places they are, from changing jobs to getting better pay to being able to stabilize the rent that we already got very, very low for them with a Catholic Charities subsidy. And it's still really difficult. So my suggestion, and whoever is listening and whoever takes the lead, is that not only do we have to partner with the state to make sure that our efforts can be further impacted, because our efforts won't be enough, but a partnership, right, with churches, with community members in the state as well, will yield to possibly helping more, helping maybe a fewer people, but farther. And so we have actually gone to very micro efforts to help people all the way from A to Z, instead of trying macro efforts of just helping a few people for a couple months, is trying to help people all the way down to the finish line, which takes a lot more effort. And of course, it means that you help less people to become more helpful, so that you can actually try to get this to a point where you are helping an individual all the way through to permanency, right? So I hope that we can work together. I am working with state to try to do a homeless symposium on our coast, since we have been doubling and tripling our efforts in the community to help their efforts. And I hope that we can find somebody that we as council members can rely on that is taking the lead.
Absolutely. And the appropriate setting, and when you're available, council member, would love to talk more.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Vice Chair Meyer.
Thank you, Chair. This is for Director Asobai. And just as you come up, I just want to say mahalo on behalf of the District 2 residents. Several of them have reached out regarding the program. Have talked about how supportive it's been for them and their families. So mahalo for the work you're doing. Because I know we all recognize the importance of ensuring that folks right now stay in their homes, right? Because the alternative is they're going to be homeless and relying on city services, our providers. I just had a couple questions for you. First one, on the eviction cases slide. So this is for the whole state. Okay, so we don't have Oahu data? Is that what we were told, or did you say it earlier and I just missed it?
I can get you Oahu data.
Okay.
We do not have Oahu data on hand.
Okay, because I'm hopeful that'll even show, the program's even more effective. And then just kind of off of what Councilmember Tupola was saying, I'm curious to know what outreach looks like in our rural communities or communities with language access barriers. I know Mr. Kuhio and Van Tassel talked about it a little bit, but just if you could expand on it, because I know we're wanting to make sure that the folks that need it most have access to it, right? And oftentimes those are folks with maybe limited English skills or English proficiency, limited internet access, all the things that make the one-on-one meetings that Mr. Kuhio was talking about earlier more important, right?
Right. So from the beginning, the U.S. Treasury asked us to think about how do we reach hard-to-reach households. And so we identified those two issues, technology access and language access. And so there are subcontractors, both under Catholic Charities and under CNHA, as well as Catholic Charities has some existing programs that they can tap. They have a site in Waianae, for example. And so we have, through those partners, they have been, our translation or interpretation support. For example, we are Oceania. They've done a lot in terms of supporting us with Pacific Islander languages. Additionally, before this program ever started, the office was a part of a planning effort with the Castle Foundation to make sure that what happened in the early days of the pandemic didn't happen with this funding, which was people didn't have the technology access, people didn't have the language skills that they needed to be able to complete an application, and therefore, in the entirety of the Ko'olauloa, Ko'olaupoko region, 55 families were able to get rent and utility relief. Now I'm happy to say it's thousands, because Waimanalo Community Health Center, Hui Mahiai in Waimanalo, originally IHS and PIC or PIC helped both in the Kailua and Kaneohe area. Now it's the Castle Hospital Foundation, the Key Project, and Hau'ula Community Center. They are all a part of our Hui in terms of regular updates, regular communication, and regular one-on-one outreach. Those folks, Safe Haven, I could list others, Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center, Kokua Kalihi Valley, they are working with families one-on-one and have a liaison in either CNHA or Catholic Charities that they work with. And so if it's a family that's facing immediate eviction, we can prioritize them. They're handled one-on-one. And we do everything we can to make sure that that grassroots-based organization that may have the person sitting across the table from them at that moment is getting the assistance they need. More recently, since the October portal reopening, we've tried to double down on our efforts to reach the hard to reach. So the Key Project, the entire Ko'olau Housing Hui, has done a number of in-person events. Our staff with CNHA and Catholic Charities has organized in-person events, including one most recently at the Filipino Community Center, where almost all of the folks that arrived had never heard of the program before, except for the Philcom outreach that they received directly. So we could not do this without them. CNHA recently told me that the new council member, Tyler Dos Santos Tam, personally helped about 40 individuals apply for the program. So we would reach out to all of you going forward and solicit the location, you know, the emails, the outreach, whatever we can do in partnership. As Councilmember Tupola noted, the disparities in funding per district, we want to make sure that it meets the need that is present in that district. We will continue to do outreach. We'll continue to work with partners. I would just say we welcome, your ideas for that. We are not the beginning and end of knowledge for how to reach everyone on this island that needs the support.
Mahalo, Director. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Members, are there any other questions? Chair has a few questions. And Dr. Asabai, thank you very much for being here. So I understand that the RURP is per household, right? And so for many of my neighbors in Kalihi, even myself, like having, let's say we have 14 people in that house, yeah? We're not going to meet that household, 14 people, and we have maybe like 5, and maybe they're adult children, and let's say providing with 2 parents working and not meeting that. So how does that? Let's say you have different types of demographics like that. How does CNHA or you break down those considerations? For like how many people are in the family, in a household?
Right. So we use HUD's area median income, and it's a scale. So it goes from one person, and the amount that's either 30, 50, or 80% AMI is the benchmark, right? You have to be at 80% AMI. And that scale for HUD goes up depending on the number of people in the household. So if you have 8 people in the household, when I think of the scale, the number is like 100 and something thousand that could be earned in that household and still be under 80% AMI. I don't have that on hand right now, but income eligibility is scaled based on the area median income, which depends and increases on the number of people in each household.
Okay, thank you. Director Asabai, I was wondering, how did either the city administration or OER determine which, I want to say, I don't want to call them projects because I understand that they're not actually projects. They're kind of like priority lists, yeah, that will be chosen from Appendix A to, I guess, help balance the remaining of the $33 million from?
So, Chair Cordero, we looked to projects that had a thematic link to the issue that we were trying to address. So we see the RURP as preventing people from being out on the streets. So we look to homeless projects or items that relate to homelessness.
Thank you. First off, I appreciate the work that everyone has been doing, especially Catholic Charities, CNHA, and OER. And I appreciate that response. And however, this brings me to see, of course, I can see that helps number 1 and number 26 priorities here. For 39, of course, we see there's a few things that can connect to it, but we see identifying abandoned properties or any properties positioned for productive use for housing or homelessness. And I understand, I see the nexus with housing mainly, and then you can connect that to rent, utility, and relief program. But for me, I don't know if I completely see the nexus with number 39, which is the bulk of the funding of 12.5 and some million dollars. Of the 44 projects that were on the Appendix A, I'm certain there would have been a lot of projects or priorities that related to housing, homelessness, and assistance for families as well as nonprofit organizations. And why specifically this certain priority to look for properties like buildings, abandoned properties? Is it because we can't do it? We can't find these properties?
So Chair Cordero, ultimately, how the reprogramming works is up to council. So if there are alternative ways that the council wishes to do this or wants information from us to help you make that decision, we're certainly here to do it. We are not by any means coming in and saying it has to be this.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering, Appendix A is the council sharing priorities from our communities. We're not just pulling them, I always say, they're not pulling it out from just our own minds. We're pulling out from our community's needs as well, which you all hear every single day as well. With that, did you or the city administration or anyone else from the city administration reach out to any or all the council members to discuss that these certain priorities are going to be used for the remaining balance of the $33 million?
So, Chair, that's a great question. As I mentioned earlier, when we first submitted this resolution, we did not identify anything. And as Chair Waters corrected me, we were supposed to do so. And so we did that this week or Friday. So I do not believe we had a discussion with the council members who submitted those items to let them know we were doing so, and I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you. Going back to, and I appreciate that, the reiteration of how much time we have for this tranche of funding, or not just tranche, but federal funding. With that, is there a sunset time for the program with that in mind? So
the SLFRF program itself, the monies have to be encumbered by the end of 2024 calendar year, and the monies have to be expended by the end of 2026 calendar year. With respect, if your question is with respect to RURP, this hopefully, we hope to make a big push to improve the economy. We hope to make a big push to educate and bring people into the work pipeline and do more on efforts to stabilize them in their household. So we would hope that this would be our last time seeking this kind of money for this program.
Okay. And so you said, hope it will be the last time seeking money for this funding at the reprogramming level or also at the federal level. I just wanted that clarification. Director Hasselbeck?
At the reprogramming level, but there is, I believe, and the director can speak to this, states that do not execute as well as we did. There are funds that the federal government can repurpose for our needs, so we might still get federal monies that we can put towards this program based on how well our local program has done.
Okay, thank you. Director Hasselbeck?
So the city, with the support of Catholic Charities and CNHA, makes projections on an ongoing basis on historical data and creates projections of need going forward. And when we do that, we provide those projections to the U.S. Treasury when they allow us to apply for reallocated funds. I will say it is not a regular process. We never know necessarily more than a month ahead when we're going to get to request the funds, and we definitely never know when we're going to receive them. We get an email when they decide that they're going to appropriate the funds. And at this point, to be clear, the funds that we have received are in the single million digits. So we've received 1.7, 2.3, or 1.8, 1.7, and 2.3 in a combination of ERA 1 and ERA 2 reallocated funds. So the reason it's hard for the Treasury is because they're pulling back funds that weren't expended and trying to then reappropriate them to localities across the country with programs that are still open. We're one of not as many programs. Many emergency rental assistance programs around the country have already shut down. So because we're still fully able to execute these funds, and we've done a good job in meeting all the obligation targets of the U.S. Treasury, we continue to be eligible for these funds. So we felt it in the best interest of the community, again, to keep this housing that's affordable in stock for our families. We continue to apply.
Thank you. I have a question, Director Hasselbeck, about about the program specifically. Do we have data on repeat applicants who have received funding from the RURP and then applied again if they were unable to meet rent again or utilities?
Yes. So those are we call them recertifications.
Okay.
So families that come back to the program are recertifying households.
Okay.
We have maintained the Treasury's, 18 months of eligibility. And at this point of the families that have received funding, it's still around 11% that have maxed out and received that total of 18 months of eligibility. I'm trying to think of the average number. What we've submitted in our quarterly reports to the Treasury is the average family receives around 4 months of support from the program on average.
Thank you. And what are the conditions? We want to see the effects of the pandemic. And I know Council Chair Waters mentioned about and it's very hard to determine between the different effect of the pandemic versus the effect of just our cost of living and just experiencing that and living day to day because struggling every day because of our cost of living. What does that determination look like when going through applicants, whether new or recertified applicants?
I'll ask Kainalu to come back up and explain how they determine pandemic harm and or immediacy of the need in the household.
Thank you. And Kainalu, may I have you please state your name and where you're from the record, please?
Aloha, Kainalu Severson, Director of Emergency Financial Assistance at the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. So with this RUP program, with the different funding sources, the eligibility for COVID impact has evolved. Initially, it was direct or indirect impact due to COVID. Now it's impact to COVID during the pandemic. So the eligibility as far as the hardship part of it is a little bit more broad, where we can serve anyone who has provide, at the very minimum, a written self-attestation of their situation during COVID. But just to be clear, that is a requirement for everyone that gets assistance for rent and utility assistance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, members, Councilmember Kiaina.
I think this would be for the executive director. With regard to those who are receiving funds, do you guys have any data on the percentage who are currently employed? And the reason I'm going down this track is I'm wondering, because workers are hard to find now. And so I think a lot of people are going back to work, and I'm just wondering, for many of these people, is it because if they're working, so number one, I kind of want to have the first question answered, but if those who
We don't have that data.
If they're working, I would think at the outset, we don't ask if they're employed or not. And the reason I'm asking is because is it because those who say are working, is it because they're in a hole? Because all the money owed that they are in need of, are they in financial need to remedy the past rent? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? First of all, it would be good for us to know if they're working. Does CNHA or Catholic Charities know that answer?
So when they apply, they have to submit pay stubs or any other kind of income, whether it be SSI, TANF, or anything else, to our caseworkers. So we can determine the amount of monthly income per household. And then we measure that against the eligibility limits of the area median income, 80% area median income and below. And again, most of them are at 50% AMI or below. They can also, although very few have, they can use eligibility for Medicaid as a proxy, because folks on this island who receive Medicaid are at 30% AMI or below. So this is not a data point that we report, and it's not a data point that we've gathered except to say anecdotally what any of us might think.
I guess I'm trying to think, hypothetically, is it possible to people to have been working and still have a hard time making ends meet? In other words, using the funds not for rent and utilities, but for other needs, and
No, the funds go directly to the landlord or the property manager or the utility. These funds, almost across the board, do not go to the tenant in the household. There are cases that we can allow it if there's a really bad relationship with the landlord and they refuse to submit information for us to be able to pay them. But on the whole, CNHA and Catholic Charities have sent this money directly to landlords or utilities.
Okay, I understand that. I guess I'm trying to get at, is it because they're behind in rent because they weren't working, or are there instances where people are working and still are behind in rent? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Again, since we're not keeping this data, we can't give you a data point on that question.
Okay.
However, at the beginning of the program, generally the arrears went back to when the last rent and utility relief programs in 2020 ended. So that was when people again applied. I think that relief lasted till, Rob, like October. So when the program opened in 2021, generally we were seeing arrears back to the point that the last rent and utility relief programs had ended. So I'll hand it over to Kainalu one more time.
And I actually just have a last question, big picture on CNHA and Catholic Charities. Given the infrastructure that you've built at your organizations beyond the rental relief program, do you believe that your organizations could assist the city with other services, social services? And if you do believe that, do you have thoughts where you could kokua? We have a lot of work. We have the Department of Community Services in the room, and a lot of the agencies are going to need to work collaboratively with nonprofit organizations to provide the services. So I'm just throwing this out there. With your infrastructure that you have built, apart from the rental relief program, do you believe that you are poised to be able to help the city with other social services for our communities?
Aloha, Council. Kuhio Lewis and Rob Van Tassel here again. Thanks for the question. Yeah, you know, the organization, we've infused millions of dollars to build up the current capacity that we have. Both organizations have over 40 full-time employees working. The staff that we've employed have been trained, developed. They're well-versed in the needs of the community, how to interact with them. So there is absolutely a lot of capacity that will sunset soon that could help the city achieve other goals that it has, whether it's workforce placement or homeless support. So we'd love to look at ways to pivot that rather than dissolve that capacity that you've helped build up.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I would echo what he says, and I would also add, this is Rob Van Tassel, Catholic Charities Hawaii. I would also add that it's enabled us to invest in software as well as people, outreach services, and then we have now 4 pillars of housing stability that we've been working on that involve employment and outreach and family stabilization and other components. So yes, I think we have a strong foundation now, and we would continue to work on that. So this has helped us also with relationships with the community in terms of landlords and strengthening those, and the Mediation Center of the Pacific. All of these agencies have come together to strengthen the overall rental market here in Hawaii.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm hoping a lot of the agencies are hearing this, but I also want to recommend to yourselves as well as your staff that there are a lot of city jobs that are available, especially at the Department of Community Services. And, you know, we were voted number 2 as the best place to work in Honolulu. And I guess I just want to say that I encourage your staff, after this program is done, to come and work with us at the city. Thank you so much.
We will let them know.
I love that. Vice Chair, Council Vice Chair Kia'aina, thank you. Okay, I forgot where I was. Okay, Council Chair Waters.
Thank you. The Director of OER again, please. What Vice Chair Kia'aina asked was, I think, a very, very important question. If these folks that are receiving aid from the city with this program are employed or not. Mm-hmm. And the reason I think it's important is because what you said was that a lot of the applicants or people receiving aid are at 50% AMI or below. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, I sound like a broken record because I always bring up this 2019 DBED study on the need for housing, which, by the way, was partially funded by the City and County of Honolulu, that identifies a huge need of housing at the 30 to 50% AMI level. Mm-hmm. So that begs the question, really, what is the city doing and what is the plan to be building homes for the 30 to 50% AMI people, which, again, are the same people who are benefiting from this program? And my bigger concern is that, you know, in Appendix A, we've pointed out what we are funding is long-term solutions. And I get your argument that this $33 million is for emergency funding as needed, but really we're supplanting what otherwise would provide long-term solutions to build homes for people who make 30 to 50% AMI. You know what I'm saying? So again, it seems like it's a Band-Aid that we're putting on, but we're really not going to stop the bleeding, because what's stopping you folks from coming back in 3 months saying, we need more money, right? When the money really could have been or should have been spent on long-term solutions. Yeah? That was more a comment than a question, actually, but please go ahead.
That is not my kuleana, so to speak.
Yeah.
I am responsible for executing the
Understood.
rental and utility relief program. Generally, again, our office is running this program because we were asked to do it at the beginning of this administration.
No,
and we want to
understood.
do whatever we can. So again, I want to emphasize that without this funding, these affordable units may not stay affordable. They may be sold. The rents may increase. So I want to just say
Or
that
do we know
it
that
is
they're
not
affordable
just-
units, or are they market-priced units and people just
On
are in them?
average, the rent that we are covering is $1,400 a month.
Okay. Hey, I do want to point out on the oneoahu.org, there's an update on money that was approved, encumbered, and actually spent. So on the website, under the bucket, provide community support and address economic needs, the $7 million appears there, and it was approved, but according to the website, it has not been expended yet. So that's correct, right?
Correct. We are in the process of executing that contract.
Okay, and then there's $31,221,624 that was approved, $16,547 that was encumbered, and there's still $14,674,000 that has not been spent, according to oneoahu.org. Correct?
I think this may be a question for the deputy managing director, but
Okay.
the earlier 31 million in SLFRF funds is with Catholic Charities and CNHA, and they are expending it based on the applications that came in through the portal and the recertifications from October 2022.
Okay, and just for clarification, I guess what I'm getting at is that according to the oneoahu.org, if you take the 14.5 million roughly, plus the 7 million, you still have $21 million available for funding. And you're asking for an additional 33 million, is that correct?
That is correct, because the funding that we have in hand is projected to cover those applicants that CNHA and Catholic Charities are processing today. They have
Okay.
not all been paid at this point.
Okay, so we still have 21 million left. Now, I do want to also point out on December 6, 2022, we got notice that the $7 million is for the temporary reopening, which I really, really appreciate the notice. But this $7 million, did that come from the first tranche or the second tranche? First tranche. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have any other questions before we move on to testifiers? Okay. With that, we have no remote registered speakers. Is there anyone else remotely who wishes to testify? Okay, Ms. Zhang.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the Budget Committee. My name is Zhu Xiong, and I'm testifying in strong support of reprogramming of the funds from the U.S. Department of Treasury's Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The city's financial support to at-risk people through the Rental and Utility Relief Program to prevent unnecessary evictions is a good thing. These efforts of the city and these programs give faith to our communities. The RURP program houses 6,571 Oahu families safely and provides support for an equitable recovery for the communities. Appropriating the funds and reprogramming to channel the money to be utilized to support these efforts is a good thing. Homelessness has been exacerbated by the COVID infection. To prevent homelessness and to address ongoing homelessness, it will require collaboration and cooperation of all levels of the community and government to integrate knowledge and then to access resources and funding to provide support and to help. I'm looking forward to see how more of the federal funds can work with the city to accomplish similar goals. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Zhang. Next up, if we have no further registered remote testifiers, we have an in-person testifier. Not in person? Oh, okay, online testifier, Adelina Pasi.
Chair, testifier is not logged in.
Okay. Next up, we have a caller with area code 860 and last 3 digits 555.
Chair, testifier is not logged in.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. First up, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-2 be amended to the hand-carried CD1. Members, Chair Waters, do you have any friendly amendment?
I would suggest to the committee that we tie the funding to or require the administration to come up with with a housing plan that they can present, kind of following up on what Councilmember Tupola was talking about. We've been asking for a housing plan for 2 years now. And I just think it would be a good idea to have them commit to a date that we can put in to the resolution. But just an idea. I mean, it's up for discussion.
Do you have a date or a certain amount of days?
Well, again, I'd put it out to the committee and see if you agree with even the idea of tying it to a housing plan.
Thank you. Members, once again, this is a friendly amendment to the hand-carried CD1, which does add the language from the ordinance 22-14. But I would like to recognize Vice Chair Kiaina.
Chair, I recommend 90 days. The administration said today that it's already going through the vetting process, so hopefully it would be done before 90 days. It is correct. The chair, we passed as a council a resolution calling for that already, and as we're making all of these complicated decisions financially, and we're going to be starting the budgetary process, it's better to have the plan as soon as possible. So again, 90 days, but of course, it should be done as soon as it's completed. So if it's done within 2 weeks, then we get a plan.
Okay.
Are you okay with that, Chair Waters?
Okay, Chair Waters?
Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. I think 90 days is reasonable, and it will help guide us in our budgetary decisions. But could it be housing and homeless plan?
Housing and homeless plan. Okay. All right. Members, are there any other comments on a friendly amendment to the hand-carried CD1? Vice Chair Wire.
Mahalo, Chair. So it sounds like we're saying that the reprogramming would be contingent on the receipt of a plan. Is that the amendment that's on the table?
Yes.
Can I ask either, I guess, Deputy MD, if he's still here, or Director? Is that doable? Is that going to be an issue? Because we want to make sure that, I guess, these funds are made use of, but sooner the better, of course, as Vice Chair said.
I apologize, Councilmember Wire, if you could just repeat the last few seconds of your comments.
Do we think that sooner than 90 days is doable for the plan that's circulating?
So if I might, I understand that the council has been asking for a plan on both homelessness and housing for a while. I hope we have been clear that it doesn't mean we haven't been executing. We've been doing a tremendous amount on both ends, PABs, Waikiki Vista, DCS's affordable housing solicitation. with respect to tying these two items together, and the director just shared with me that both of our partners, CCH and CNHA, have a certain amount of days of funding, 6 to 8 weeks of funding left. So I don't know the practicality of tying these two together and waiting to see one before the money flows to the other.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other? Okay, Councilmember Say.
Yeah, I would tend to support the administration at this point in time, but if it is possible, you could tie it in with a new resolution requesting them
A new
And-
resolution requesting that.
before the approval of the city and county's budget. Instead of 90 days, maybe it's going to be 120 days. My point is that they need to spend this money to continue the program.
I
And
understand.
if they don't meet that obligation in 90 days, what's the penalty or what's the recourse of action? Are we going to punish them? Chair, that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying if you could do it in a separate measure rather than putting that as a leverage that da-da-da-da-da. But if you want to do it, I would support you on the amendment to take it all the way until we approve the county budget. How's that? That gives you another 30 days, 60 days. This is May. But it's for discussion, right? That's the
Yes.
whole point.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola, on the amendment.
Thanks so much. I know I'm a non-voting member, but thanks for allowing me to come and ask questions. My thought is that we don't need to have it perfectly right away, and I think that we've been waiting somehow for perfection, which we'll never reach. Is there any way that we can at least get a draft? And I had asked this last year and the year before, hey, let's all work together on this because we all have pieces in our district we're working on that we would like to contribute to the plan. So if there is any possible draft that we can look to sooner and maybe a finalized one in 90 days, just a thought. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, any other discussion on this? Okay, with that,
Yeah.
Councilmember Say.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the reason why I bring this up as far as 90 or 120 or 160 or 50, throughout the past 2 years, how many different departments are addressing homelessness, housing, etc.? And that's where we're not up to par in understanding the homeless and housing programs that we have in the state of Hawaii, and the county of Oahu, mind you. And that's just my personal thoughts. From DLM to DDC to BFS, as far as the encumbrance of the funds, all of this plays a part in the overall operations of housing. I think one of the shortcomings for the administration was when the homeless coordinator left, and with Director Crucky moving from housing to the Department of Community Services, I think it's very difficult to find a person of that competence to really grasp what it takes to run a housing program. Correct me
Yes.
if I'm wrong, but I just don't like to see where I gotta say 90 days or else, So that's the only reason why I'm making that thought about just a resolution. And then if you don't want to do a resolution, would the Deputy MD be in support of having that plan done before we approve the budget?
Thank you for that question. I do recognize that for purposes of the council to evaluate the budget and determine how it should be shaped, greater clarity on all of our different efforts would be helpful. So we are certainly committed to providing that in some organized fashion to the council.
Thank you. Okay, last comments. Council Chair Waters.
Thank you. Taking into account what everybody said, if we have 6 weeks of funding currently, why don't we condition the release of this 33 million? And by the way, do they need the entire 33 million? Because as I mentioned, there's 7 million plus 14 million still there, but that's 6 weeks worth of aid. But the idea here is we've already passed the resolution asking for a housing plan. I think we passed it back in 2021, and we still haven't seen it. So as Councilmember Say points out, it is leverage to get it done. And it doesn't need to be perfect, as Councilmember Tupola pointed out. We just want to see what's the plan for housing and homelessness. So 30 days contingent upon the release of the money, which gives them enough time to get it done before the money runs out. And then secondly, perhaps a more thorough plan in 90 days before the budget is done. That's just my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you for allowing me this consideration. I do want to recommend that I do further amend the hand-carried CD1. I will allow for the addition of the housing strategy and homeless plan to be added to this hand-carry. I will have it with 90 days of adoption to this resolution because basically we won't be able to know what we're working with without anything really before us. And it is a long-standing document that we've been really asking for, and we're looking to work with the administration, but we can't work with anything that we don't know or don't see yet. With that, are there any further discussions on the further amendment to the hand-carried CD1? Vice Chair Wire.
Just quickly, Chair, because I might have misheard. So I heard the 90 days, so was it 90 days?
From adoption. Or if sooner.
Okay, okay, so the resolution would be adopted and then it's saying 90 days.
Correct.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Chair.
Any objections? Any reservations? This resolution has been amended to a CD1. Okay, with that, I do want to highlight that this huge discussion that we've had before another very big discussion that we have about real property is really addressing a lot of the, like you all mentioned, long-term plans that the council has been asking to address. And I will be recommending to postpone this until the February 7, 2023 meeting, because not only was this resolution really just last minute to be added to our agenda, but it didn't allow for us to ask these questions. We've had such a huge discussion because of that, because of all the information, this very important information that many of us council members, even those that are not here, have to have with the administration. This is in no way, no intent to stop the funding from occurring at all. This is why, I double checked when my next committee meeting is going to be, because there is important information and questions that we need to have with the city administration before this. My intent for the next committee is to pass this, but I do also want to thank Deputy Managing Director because he's allowed us to say, hey, this resolution is open for discussion too. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it. But it leads me to point out to you where the funding, where we are reprogramming the funding from. It's Appendix A. And Appendix A really paints out the council's long-standing requests for long-term solutions for the things that, thankfully we have OER and CNHA and Catholic Charities to really help us with these emergency programs. But what are those plans? What are those updates? What are the statuses? What are the ideas even? And that's why what the request for a housing plan homeless strategy comes from as well. We're kind of hanging with all this information. And so given with the comments today, it seems that we clearly need to further have these discussions, to come back on February 7. And with that, I'll stop talking and say that the chair recommends that, yes. I did this. I did. This one. I'm not doing that. Okay, the chair recommends that action on resolution 23-2 CD1 be postponed to the Tuesday, February 7, I think it's February 7, Committee on Budget. Any discussion? Any objections, reservations? With that agenda, we will have that on the next agenda. Okay, next up, we have agenda item number 4. It is the resolution 23-1 approving and authorizing the reprogramming of ESG funds in the amount of $139 million and $28.71 for the Partners in Care Oahu's Continuum of Care Homeless Management Information System project. With us from the administration, we have Director Krucky from the Department of Community Services, as well as Darryl Young, Program Administrator from DCS.
Thank you, Chair. Aloha, committee members. I'm going to have Daryl Young present this, but this is really a reprogramming effort under the 26-year plan. And he's going to explain not just this effort of reprogramming to balance out to zero, but the subsequent ones that are coming along as well. So Administrator Daryl Young.
Good morning, Council Budget Chair Cordero, Council Chair Waters, and members. Thank you for hearing Resolution 23-1. This is a normal reprogramming that we do at the end of each contract year. So this is the FY21 funds that ran from January 2021 to December 2021. Because of the large amount of dollars that we got from the CARES Act, we allowed the nonprofits to extend to April 2022 to expend the dollars, and then we've spent the time from April 2022 to try to close out the contracts. Each year we normally get about $700,000 from HUD in ESG funds, in which the council through the budget process allows us another $700,000 in city matching funds to be used for a total pot of about $1.4 million. In addition to that, the council gives us about 11 to 12 million in general funded monies for city-sponsored projects such as Housing First, Increments 1, 2, and 3, the Outreach Navigation Program, which is the one where we help legal and medical for persons suffering from homelessness. We also do landlord engagement. We do the transportation program out of that. We do the Punavai rest stop out of that, and we also do Hale Maliola. So at the end of the period, what we try to do is collect all the unspent funds, and we in the past years have allocated it toward PIC for the homeless management information systems. That's where the $139,000 is gonna go to. And then we also, if there's residual city funds, rather than coming back to council and asking for additional general funded monies, we match it against an existing contract. In this case, we're matching the $128,000 against monies we've already contracted with IHS at Hale Maliola, so that we don't have to overspend in our budget, right? So it's just leveraging more funds out of it. So that wraps this up, yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Young, Administrator Young. Members, do we have any questions? Okay, really quick, was wondering about the ESG program funds not used in a timely manner. Why was it not used in a timely manner, thus necessitating this request for reprogramming?
So the primary source of funds, some of it was just they didn't spend in their contract. Mm-hmm. The two large amounts that we have to reprogram came out of rapid rehousing for both Kalihipalama Health Center and IHS, and both of them are downsizing their housing programs, primarily because of the lack of interest in participants in doing case management or doing financial literacy. So you'll see that theme occur also when I come back for the FY22, FY23 funds, and even when we present to you in this budget, the FY24 funds, there were no applicants for rapid rehousing or homeless prevention.
May I ask for clarification on the lack of participation for case management?
Yeah.
And was this just within the last fiscal year?
No, it's been occurring from COVID. And a lot of it is the city tends to do, and I think I shared this before, we tend to do what we call is a short shallow. So I'm only gonna give you, rather than a year's worth of rental, I'm only gonna give you 4 months, right? So it's only gonna cover you in that time of need and not beyond. And so there's a lot of effort on the part of the participants, and they're going to the path of least resistance.
Okay. May I ask, so to keep up this program or these types of programs and to increase participation, what is DCS working with our social service providers to either assist in that, or what are we requiring? What's going to be different?
So COVID allowed us to take a look at certain operations, and Councilmember Wire was a key part of our team. What we ended up doing on these reprogrammings that you'll see is we started to focus a little bit more on the shelters, emergency shelters such as Kinaeha, Halekipa. We're actually funding a little bit more out in Maililand, in Councilmember Tupola's area. We saw areas in which during COVID, certain shelters closed. We lost Uluke Kukui out that side, so that's why we focused on making sure we could support areas like that. We looked at areas on the North Shore and Central Oahu who was missing a key factor in street outreach, so we're working on that. And we're also cognizant and trying to keep in mind from the FRF side, discussions that we've had with both the chair and the vice chair in their areas on key projects that they want us to look at. For example, mental health and observation is a key facet for council chair, and that's what we're trying to look at as we start to look at future programming or future reprogramming, is how do we best put those monies to use. A lot of times we're soliciting these monies 18 months in advance. So I'm kind of like asking you, okay, where do you think we're going to be 18 months from now? And sometimes we're right and sometimes we're not. So we're funding a lot of the alternate projects is what you'll see. But it's just a matter of us, after having time and data on our side, to put the monies in better use, rather than what we had picked 18 months ago. But we appreciate the opportunity to work with the council and address these needs.
Okay, thank you. Members, are there any questions? Councilmember Tupola. Okay,
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Mr. Young, we appreciate all that you do, and of course your whole team. My question was in regards to street outreach. So I'm reading through this, and there's various programming for reprogramming for facilities. Is the street outreach question going to be asked at a different time through a different mode?
So actually, your thing we're looking at with a different pot of money.
Okay.
So, but we are looking at it.
Second question, in regards to the HMIS.
Yeah.
So you guys do have money for that. What cost are you covering for them?
Okay, so they're actually changing their system out. So the monies that you'll see in the FY21, FY22, FY23 is to pay for this new module that they're working on.
And when you say systems, you mean a software, or you mean
software? So they're going from case-worthy to a different type of software.
But they're still going to use the
Still going to use it, yeah.
But are they still using the tool, the VI SPDAT?
That's a mandatory tool, so yeah. But what we need, what we found out during COVID, and especially the Oahu Housing Now program, was it's only good as the data that they're putting in.
Yes.
Right.
So I wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah.
So I understand we're supporting the software, but I do believe that there are various tools that are allowed for federal funding. VI SPDAT is one of a handful.
Yeah.
We do not feel like it's been very effective. I need more people on the ground in my community, and we need a tool that's actually going to give us the outcome that we need. One of the problems that we see in this system, and I'm saying it out loud so that everyone knows that I'm talking with the state on this, is we need people to be geographically prioritized. So I get it that we're working with the most vulnerable, and the whole system is actually almost putting us in a triage, because we're constantly trying to help the most vulnerable, but in various areas instead of in concerted groups, and of course, instead of in geographic areas.
Yeah.
So if so-and-so is prioritized, this could mean that they live in Waianae, but they're prioritized to get housing in Kailua, and then that's the suggestion that the system gives them. We need to work in, geographic areas in order for this to have a bigger impact, and for that person to have a support system. So I'm hoping, I know we're just the allocator of monies, but as an entity of allocation of money, I do think we need to have the highest efficiency of the tools we use, and watch very carefully what the output looks like. Because if the output is not getting us to where we need with our homeless goals, then we need to change that and not keep funding something that may or may not be getting us to where we need to go.
Totally agree. And one thing that I'm hoping to get funded through FRF is HUD TA for both the front end on the intake for nonprofits as well as the back room on how to invoice us on a more timely manner. And so I'm talking with Mark Chandler of HUD CPD here, just to make sure we have a kind of an influx of new nonprofit executive directors as well as housing directors, and it's a good time for us to kind of have this training all over again and just kind of build up our resources and capacity for our partners.
That'd be great, and I do hope that there'll be a few others, maybe in the street outreach when you guys are looking at for that ability to do the intake. So right now we only have 2 designated nonprofits that can do it, and it takes them about an hour to do each individual. If I'm helping 100 homeless people, this past year, only maybe 20 of them were in the database.
Yeah.
But by the time I got all of them in the database, like 4 or 5 months had passed. And so I think the efficiency of the tool, as well as the ability for more people to be able to input, maybe they don't need to see all the HMIS, but we definitely need more people being able to utilize the tool and input people into the system so that they can immediately get the resources they need. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for letting me just say it out loud so that we can keep working together.
Thank you,
Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Tupola. Any other discussion? Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, Administrator Young. With that, we are moving on to registered testifiers. We have Gigi Zhang.
I'm just going to reverse the camera. Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the Budget Committee. My name is Chizi Zhong, or Angela Melody Young. I'm testifying in strong support of the resolution. The Chair's recommendation was a brilliant plan of action. The recommendation was to create a resolution in accordance with the annual Executive Capital Budget Ordinance. And this will allow the funds that they have had difficulty expending to be utilized widely for homelessness prevention. I won't pretend like I know what the budget terminologies are and all that processes and what they do, but I can talk about something that we do in our neighborhood patrol. Homelessness is something we encounter regularly, and I can tell you the effects of it in our communities at the bottom level. It's trauma, pain, abuse, and immoral behavior. That's what's happening in our state. And the effects are deep stress to our keikis and anxiety in our everyday lives. And history repeats itself in the form of ongoing violence in our streets, gang activity plaguing our neighborhoods, crime on the rise, and an escalating homeless problem. So we are grateful for resolutions such as this and the Chair's recommendations. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Zhang. All right, we have the next testifier is Natalie Iwasa.
Oh, thank you. I hadn't registered to testify on this, but I wanted to understand if I heard the administration correctly, and when they stated that the funding was $700,000 per year. Going back about a decade or so, it used to be millions of dollars. And if we're only looking at $700,000 now, that's really, I think, a sad reflection on what happened in the past. So I just ask that the City Council be very diligent in the oversight of the city and how it's spending the federal funds and the timing that those funds are being spent and reports that are required to be sent up to the federal government, because I think that is, they're not going to keep giving the city money if we can't meet deadlines, can't spend things the way that they say. So I just wanted to put that out there, and thank you so much for allowing me to testify.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, let's see. Are there any other remote registered speakers?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. Are there any in-person registered speakers?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify? Okay. All right, seeing none. Members, we are in discussion. Okay, all right, thank you, members. The chair recommends that Resolution 23-1 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion? Any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving on to agenda item number 5. We have our informational briefing on the real property tax valuation and appeals processes. With us from the administration, we have both Director Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, as well as the Real Property Assessment Administrator, Steven Takara. I don't know if you have any presentation that you have, is it all set up over there and everything?
Yes, they have it set up.
Okay, but go ahead.
Budget Chair Cordero, Chair Waters, honorable council members here today, thank you very much for allowing us to share information on our current and really unchanged real property tax valuation process and the appeal process. I think it's a good topic to cover right now, so I want to thank Budget Chair Cordero for suggesting the information briefing. We'll get started with Stuart Peterson and Rosalind B. Stuart is our appraising supervisor. Rosalind is our technical officer. We also have with us Steve Takara, our administrator for the Real Property Assessment Division. Steve, do you want to say anything? He's good? Okay, so we'll get started on presentation, and we're going to remain after the presentation to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Aloha, Budget Chair Cordero, Budget Vice Chair Wire, Council Chair Waters, Council Vice Chair Kiaina, and Council members. I appreciate this opportunity to be here today. My name is Stuart Peterson. I'm a Real Property Appraiser 6, a Group Supervisor. So today I'm going to go over some of the duties of our division, the organizations and standards we adhere to, mass versus individual appraisal, and the market data approach. After that, Rosalind B. will then cover information, available records, the importance of reviewing your notice of assessment and your property record, and our website and the Board of Review appeal process. So what does the Real Property Assessment Division do? Well, RPAD, as we are also known, follows the revised ordinances of Honolulu, Section 8-7.1, to value all taxable real properties on Oahu using methods suitable for mass valuation for taxation purposes. In the appraisal world, there are 3 general approaches to value: the market data approach, the cost approach, and the income approach. RPAD is required by ordinance to assess by 2 of these approaches, the market data and cost approaches. Our goal is to generate uniform and equalized assessments of fair market value, and this process has not changed under 8-7.1. So what is the difference between mass appraisal and individual appraisal? Well, RPAD applies mass appraisal in accordance with the revised ordinances of Honolulu. Mass appraisal is the systematic appraisal of groups of properties as of a given date using standardized procedures and statistical testing. Because we value over 303,000 taxable properties every year, we use a computer-assisted mass appraisal system, or CAMA for short, to do complex mass calculations. On the other hand, individual appraisals are done by private appraisers on a single property for purchasing, refinancing, or estate planning upon a lender or homeowner's request for purposes other than taxation. Private appraisers typically select 3 or more sales and analyze these sales, then manually apply adjustments to estimate the value. Appraisers in the private sector typically follow different guidelines to perform their assignments and have a different scope of work. Some of the organizations and standards we use and follow are the International Association of Assessing Officers, IAAO as they are known, set the standards for mass appraisal and provide education. We are members of the IAAO and follow its mass appraisal standards and use their resources for educating and training our appraisers. Next is the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice, or USPAP. They set the standards for professional appraisal practice in the United States. All private appraisers must follow USPAP in conducting their appraisals. However, RPAD is not subject to all of USPAP because of the jurisdictional exception rule, but we comply with parts of USPAP that apply to mass appraisal. I'll now be going over the market data approach, which is used in most of our residential appraisals. This is the process of deriving a value indication for the property being assessed by comparing it to similar properties that have recently sold, identifying appropriate units of comparison, and making adjustments to the sale prices of the comparable properties based on relevant market-derived elements of comparison. Our CAMA system, called IAS World, is provided by Tyler Technologies. Market modeling is what we call our CAMA system, CAMA version of the market data approach. When it comes to mass appraisal, a market model is basically a representation that explains the relationship between sale prices and various property components or variables. An example of a market model, or simply referred to as a model sometimes, would be the single-family homes in Manoa, the condos in Salt Lake. Another one would be the single-family homes in Royal Kunia. Those would be examples of models. They're each different and each have different markets. Okay, this printout called the Comparable Sales Analysis Report is provided to taxpayers upon request. And this is for a single parcel. So here on the left side, are the different variables and labels, like land area, living area, year built, etc. Okay. Here in this next column, we have information about the subject property or the property being assessed. Okay. Down at the bottom, you can see the final market value. Okay. And finally, on the right side is the data for the comparable sales, also known as comps. Each property uses 5 comps that are the most comparable of all the sales in the model. Okay, so let's turn our attention to the valuation section here at the bottom of the page. Okay, I'm going to zoom in to make it a little easier to follow. Okay, so up at the top of this section, you're going to see the sale dates and prices for each of the 5 comps. Okay, and then this row here is the market estimate. So let me explain to you what this is and how it's calculated. Okay, so the market estimate, simply put, is how we make adjustments to the sale prices to account for differences between the comps and the subject. Okay, so this is just an example of how a market estimate is calculated. Keep in mind, it's simplified just for this demonstration. Okay, so here we have the variables like we saw in the previous page. And these are just a few of more than 100 variables an appraiser can choose from. Most market models will have about 15 to 20 different variables. So the Manoa model might have 15, the Royal Kunia model might have 12. You know, it's going to differ between models. Okay, here in this column are coefficients, and these are a per unit value attributed to each variable after the appraisers analyze and calibrate the statistical results provided by the CAMA system. Okay? So like the variables, each model has its own coefficients. So a bedroom might add $5,000 in value to one model and $3,000 in another model. A single square foot of living area could add $100 in Model A and $180 in Model C. Okay, the third column is the description of the sample property. So we multiply each coefficient by its corresponding description, and that's going to result in its contribution of each variable. So here's an example. We'll look at bedrooms. okay? The coefficient here is $5,000 per bedroom. We multiply that 5,000 by the 3 bedrooms, resulting in a product of $15,000. So that $15,000 is the amount the bedrooms are contributing to the market estimate, okay? So summing up all the contributions is gonna give us the final market estimate. Okay, so as you can see, each comp has a market estimate, as does the subject property. So these 3, here I've highlighted in green, are greater than the subject's market estimate. So this tells us that comps 2, 4, and 5 are superior to the subject property. Okay, and then these 2 here in yellow have market estimates that are less than the subject's market estimate. So this tells us that they are inferior to the subject. How superior or inferior are they? Well, the differences in the market estimate between the subject and each comp are gonna be here in this blue box below, okay? So those are the differences. If we start with the subject market estimate of $613,200, then subtract the first comp market estimate of $607,820, we get a difference of $5,380, okay? Okay, we do the same thing for comp number 2, okay? Start with the subject market estimate, subtract the comp market estimate, and the difference is negative $14,390. So the differences are a total of all the adjustments we've made to tell us how much to adjust each sale price to get to our adjusted price. As an example, let's look at comp number 1, okay? The sale price is $705,000. Because it is slightly inferior to the subject, we're going to increase its sale price in order to equalize it with the subject. So we add that $5,380 to that, and our adjusted sale price is $710,308. Okay, so we could do the same, we could do the opposite, to a superior property. So comp 2 is showing as superior. So we're gonna subtract that $14,390, which we're pointing at here, from the sale price of $625,000, okay? And that's gonna leave us a difference of $610,610 for the adjusted, okay? So these 5 adjusted sale prices are important to the final value, and I'm gonna explain why soon. Okay, the final figure I'll explain before we get to the final market value is this number here called the weighted estimate. This considers all 5 adjusted sale prices and assigns a weight to each of them based on their comparability to the subject, as well as how much we've adjusted them from their sale price. More weight is given to sales that are not only more comparable, but have smaller adjustments from their sale price. So this weighted estimate is one of the 7 values that is gonna make up the final market value. So we go back to our 5 adjusted sale prices, and then we're also gonna look at the market estimate of the subject property. So these 7 numbers here are gonna lead us to our final market value. Okay, so I've arrayed these 7 from lowest to highest, okay? These are the 7 numbers that we just looked at in the last slide. In order to minimize statistical bias, we eliminate the highest 2 and we eliminate the lowest 2. The middle 3 values shown here in yellow are averaged to give us the final market value. In this case, it's $614,700. And we have a video explaining this market modeling process on our website, right here where the arrow's pointing. So please check it out at realpropertyhonolulu.com. And you can also find a wealth of other information related to property assessments, as well as our division. Thank you for your time and allowing me to share. I'll now be turning the mic over to Roslyn.
Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, Budget Chair Cordero, Vice Chair Wire, and committee members. My name is Roslyn B., Property Technical Officer with the Road Property Assessment Division. As Stuart mentioned, I'll be going over information available on our website and also available upon request from our office. I'll also walk you through the importance of reviewing the property records and reviewing the notice of assessment. Then I'll go over the option to appeal with the Board of Review if a taxpayer does not agree with the notice of assessment. Our website provides you with a great deal of information. So let's look at an example of the property record. If we search a tax key or address, we get the following information. This screenshot alone will provide you with information that you will find on the notice of assessment, such as the property class, the assessed value, the exemption amount, and the net taxable value. This section provides you with land information, such as land size, and detailed information of the building for this property. For example, this building has a 921 square foot living area with a carport on the bottom floor and a 1,522 square foot living area upstairs. In this section, it provides historical information such as permit information for this property, sales information. So for example, if you look at this property, there's a transaction where our appraiser had vetted this sale and determined it was a valid sale that could be used in the valuation process. We see that there's another sale or another transaction for this property, which our appraiser also determined was a valid sale to use for the valuation process. The recent sales in areas section was recently added. Thank you to Chair Waters for recommending this information on the website. So what this shows is when you click on the sale by neighborhood button, it produces a list of transactions in this property's neighborhood, which gives you an idea of what the properties are selling for and which transactions the appraiser has determined are valid sales to be used for the valuation process. If you want to know which sales from this list was specifically used to assess your property, contact our office and ask for the comparable sales analysis. The information that we just saw on our website is available upon request to a taxpayer from our office. Similar to the website, the property records provide property information. The comparable sales analysis provides sales that were used to value the subject property. And the base lot analysis provides sales used to derive land values in each neighborhood. Taxpayers are encouraged to review their property records that contain land descriptions like lot size and building improvements like square foot living area that we just saw in the website screenshots. Accuracy of these descriptions are important as these property characteristics are the basis for its annual notice of assessment, including the net taxable value. The amount of the net taxable value and tax rate of the property class are used to calculate the annual tax bill. We highly recommend taxpayers report any discrepancies to our office as it may impact the assessment value. Which takes us now to the notice of assessment, where the assessment value is reported to the taxpayer on this notice of assessment that was delivered about 3.5 weeks ago on December 15th. Similar to our website, the notice provides 5 key elements of a property: the parcel ID, property value, the exemption amount, net taxable value, and the property class. So if you notice, if there's a class change from the year before, as is the case in this notice, it'll be noted in red. So in this case, last year the class was residential, and now for 2023, it's residential A, possibly because the exemption amount is 0, the property is over $1 million. So why review your notice? If you don't agree with the information provided on this notice, such as the value or the class, or if you feel there should be an exemption on the notice, you may contact our office to discuss your concerns. If after discussing your concerns with our office, you still do not agree with the notice of assessment information, you have options to appeal. Before I go over your options, I want to point out the information regarding the importance of reviewing your notice and property record information that we just went over can be found on our webpage. So we reviewed our property record for accuracy. We reviewed our notice of assessment, and we still don't agree. So what option does a taxpayer have? The taxpayer has the option to appeal to the Board of Review with the City and County of Honolulu, or to the Tax Appeal Court with the State of Hawaii. Today is Tuesday, the 10th. The deadline to file an appeal is January 15th, which is this Sunday. Because it falls on a Sunday, if a taxpayer chooses to walk in their appeal, they would need to submit it to us by this Friday, 4:30. Or if they want to mail it in, they can mail it in Saturday, the 14th. The latest that they would be submitting the appeal is through our website, filing online 11:59 p.m. on January 15th. This is a sample of the appeal form that must be completed and filed with a $50 deposit. We will now go over this form on the next slide. So if the taxpayer doesn't agree with the notice of assessment here on the left, the taxpayer would complete the form in the previous slide. On the right is information from the form. So according to Section 8-12 that addresses appeals, it requires the taxpayer to inform the Board of Review of the reason or grounds for which the taxpayer does not agree with the notice of assessment. It's important to provide the reason for appealing or be subject to dismissal. So if a taxpayer believes the assessed value or the property value shown on the notice of assessment on the left exceeds by more than 10% of the property's market value, they would select grounds 1. If a taxpayer believes this notice creates a lack of uniformity or inequality because of the methods used, or the taxpayer believes or disagrees with the classification, they would select ground 2. If the taxpayer believes this notice should show an exemption amount, and in this case it doesn't show anything, they would select ground 3. If a taxpayer believes the information on this notice was illegal or unconstitutional, they would select ground 4. But I need to point out that if they select ground 4, only ground 4, if only ground 4 is selected, Section 8-12.9C states, the Board of Review does not have the power to determine any issues regarding constitutional or federal laws, so the Board of Review would rule as assessed. A taxpayer can check one ground, all grounds, or a combination of grounds of appeal. If the taxpayer selects grounds 1, 2, and/or 4, the taxpayer must report to the board what they believe the value should be. So going over the Board of Review appeal process, the taxpayer is encouraged to contact real property. Right now, our hotline number is 808-768-7000 to address any concerns. If the taxpayer still feels aggrieved, they'll file an appeal with the deposit by January 15. Our office will send out a hearing notice to the appellant via certified mail within 30 days of the hearing date. Through communications between the taxpayer and the appraiser, it's possible that there might be a settlement prior to the Board of Review hearing. The Board of Review hears the case and decisions are mailed to the appellant. The appellant has the option to appeal to the tax appeal court within 30 days of the decision. Payment of the taxes are required to avoid penalties and interest while the appeal is pending. So every year, we require our trained appraisers to apply high appraisal standards to produce accurate, uniform, and equalized assessments. We follow the revised ordinances of Honolulu, where valuations are based on 100% fair market value. The valuation process has not changed. Market sales are validated in our assessment program and can be queried on our website. If you want to know more about the residential value process, a video is available on our website. We encourage everyone to review their notice of assessment and their property records or property information on our website for discrepancies. Contact our office to report any discrepancies or to question the assessment information on the notice. Our appeal hotline and our in-person service are staffed with appraisers from Monday through Friday, 7:45 to 4:30, with our last day being this Friday, because the 15th lands on a Sunday. But our website is still available 24 hours for filing appeals till this Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Outside of the appeal process, outside of the appeal period, our office is available to answer questions and respond to property record requests. We continue to reach out to taxpayers through community events so we can provide a better understanding of real property assessments. Thank you for allowing us this time to share with you what we do for our citizens of the city.
Thank you very much, members. We are open for questions for our Real Property Assessment Division, RPAD. We have Vice Chair Wire.
Yeah, mahalo, Chair. And thank you for holding the info briefing. It's very timely and I think really important. And of course, thank you all for coming down, Ms. B, okay, and Mr. Peterson, and of course, Director. I have a few technical questions first. None of them are gotcha questions, but so if folks call, so that community members call the number, we think someone's going to answer the phone. Yeah, okay. Is there voicemail if they don't, or?
So what's happening right now is we have people being dispatched to other duties. So we man this phone bank with other staff members because we know there's a lot of people calling.
Yeah.
So doing that, and if the call goes to voicemail, we're asking that they email us so that we can get back to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. So you have seen a lot of more calls this year.
About the same,
Okay.
surprisingly. Yeah.
Okay, good. My first time in office, so I don't know what the normal call is, but I've gotten a lot. So in terms of the appraisal process and the appeal, some folks are concerned like, oh, if they go and appeal it, it could actually increase the value. Is that a possibility? Like if they come in, they challenge it, and then there's a closer review, and then BFS might actually be like, oh, this is actually, a higher value property?
I don't know how often that happens, but I would say if it was to go up, it's because something was missing, something was wrong with the record. And that's why we say check your property record. You can go online on the website if you don't want to call us, and just look at the information to make sure it's accurate.
Okay. So not super common, so people should feel comfortable doing it if they think it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm still digesting all these numbers. District 2, I think, is zones, 5, 6, 7, and 9, with the 4 highest increases in valuation, particularly North Shore and Ko'olauloa. And data-wise, I understand, but outside of that, is this an anomaly? Is this expected? Is it going to happen again? Were you surprised? Were you folks surprised going over these numbers to see the increase or expecting it? And that might be a director question. Feel free, anybody, to chime in, but.
Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, Council Member. Very good question. I think a part of it is an aberration. I don't know the complete proportion of the aberration causing it, but coming out of COVID, the lockdown, there was a lot of pent-up demand, to buy homes. Not just locally, but from people outside of state as well. Low interest rates, as we all know, low inventory of housing units, and all of those variables push prices up. I have friends who had sold homes, and they sold at above their asking price, and there were actually more buyers interested in their property than they anticipated. Mm-hmm. So it took a little longer, not because of anything negative for them, but there were just people that wanted to see the property, and the bids just kept going in. So yeah, there was that. And in terms of our administration, we recognize that, and we understand that there are a number of taxpayers asking for relief. At the same time, we got to ask ourselves, we still have to fund our budget. We still have to prepare and propose a balanced budget. We have to think about things like who will pay for, how we're going to pay for the ongoing increases in pay that were approved through collective bargaining. We're going to have, we're still looking at our bus services. Handy van's been on the news. We need to beef up our emergency services staffing. There's all kinds of needs that the public has that we need to prioritize, and the mayor will prioritize, submit a balanced budget. And we're hoping that as we deliberately go through the process, we have some surplus that we can do something, with in terms of relief. But we're not there yet to say that we have, the surplus. But we're definitely it's front of mind, top of mind.
Definitely, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I would assume it might not equal out exactly, but if values have gone up, we'll be bringing in more RPT. So it would follow that there's a little more wiggle room.
It depends, yeah. Yes, it could, but you have to look at each situation. My personal situation, embarrassed to say, originally, I think I've said this before, I wasn't taking homeowners exemption originally. We bought our home in Kailua in '93, and not until we did our refi that the broker said, hey, you're not taking your exemption. And, I didn't know, but I wasn't focused on it. And that's why, as Rosalind said, we're trying to do more outreach and education so people know that they have, the right for homeowners exemption. I think you got to look at each situation. And then we have on the Treasury side, the tax credit for low-income homeowners. The income limit in a household is $60,000. And it's everybody on the deed. You have the homeowners take the homeowners exemption. The tax then is limited to 3% of income with a bottom of $300. So that's out there too. So you have to really look at each taxpayer situation and make sure they're taking advantage of, in terms of what's out there. We also have pending bills, legislation, I think up for second reading, that are looking at increasing the homeowners exemption and increasing the household income limit to expand the base, right, for credit and relief. But you have to realize that because of due process, we got to go through readings, discussions, analysis, and then we have to go through the measurement process. Our cycle every year, as Rosalind explained, is very prescriptive. So we have to go through the process. So these increases in homeowners exemption dollars or the income limit will probably not go into effect until fiscal year 25, just because of timing and the fact that we have a prescriptive process to implement changes in things like the exemption. So I just wanted to put that out there too.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Budget Vice Chair. Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, Council Chair Waters.
Thank you, Chair Cordero. Thank you, Director Kawano and your staff. This is really, really helpful. And all the constituents who have called my office, I encourage them to watch this because it does explain a lot. And I really am happy that you folks put the videos up there as well. This was, I think, something that came up last year during this discussion, so that's also super helpful. I do still have a couple questions, namely, how do you determine the difference between residential A and just residential? I know obviously if it's a second home valued at over $1 million, but a couple of the calls that I've been getting is that these people live in their home and their assessment came out that they're residential A. So would you mind explaining that?
Okay, I think I'll let the experts go through it because they touched on that. And by the way, I want to thank Stuart and Rosalind for their presentations. I thought they did a really good job. And Chair Waters, to your point, over the last week in preparing for today, I watched the video on real property tax valuations. And if any of you haven't watched it, it's good. I've watched it 3 times. And it's really good stuff. But I'd like to call on maybe Rosalind, because you covered that.
Yeah. Thank you. And I agree. Your presentation was very, very succinct and clear.
So I purposely put that example up on the notice because it showed the residential A for this year and residential from last year. And that's how the notice will show up if there's a change, to let people know, look at something's happening. Because the property values have gone up, I guess there's been more people switching from, property switching from residential to residential A because that $1 million threshold. And on that notice, if you notice, there was no home exemption. It was 0. So that's the key. And when we had gone to that community event with Council Toba, it was an eye-opener because we invited, people were afraid, they don't want to talk to real property. But, we told, we're nice people. So they, some would come up and we're trying to educate the community. So we asked them, pull up the tax key, same like how I did here. Pull up a tax key, we're looking at the property. You don't have a home exemption. Do you live there? Do you own and occupy? Yes. Okay, fill out the application. Because we don't want them to fall into this residential A and paying the higher tax.
So you said something interesting, that if it's a clue that it could be residential A if they don't apply for a homeowner's exemption. So was Director Kawano's Kailua home Res A for years? rather than regular residential and just not with the homeowner's exemption? Wasn't over the threshold, okay. But isn't it possible that some people will have a home that they live in that they never filed the homeowner's exemption? Are you gonna then automatically put them in Res A? You're living in the
If it
home,
meets
you forgot, or nobody ever told you to do it, and it's over $1 million. Are you gonna now say they're Res A unless they come in and say, hey, wait? Now, is that correct?
Unfortunately, it's the provisions of the revised ordinances of Honolulu, the ordinances. If it's a residential property, you don't have a home exemption, and then it now turns over $1 million, it'll change from residential to residential A.
That's in the statute, in the ordinance? Can you point out where that is? Because it's automatically done by ordinance? Maybe that's something that we need to look at.
I can grab my...
Because it isn't possible that you own a home that's over $1 million and you simply didn't put in your exemption. Yes, that's a rhetorical question. So, question then, if this happens, what does the homeowner do? Obviously, they can call you, right, and say, hey, I live there. And then you folks would change it back.
So we tell them, file a home exemption.
Yeah.
But by then, that 1 year, because of the ordinance, they'll have to pay the Res A. But if they call and, because, hey, what's happening?
Yeah.
Taxes are higher.
Yeah.
Then we can help them, we can assist them to get back into the residential.
Okay, so if somebody calls you today and says, I actually live there and I did not do a homeowner's exemption, you're saying there's nothing we can do for these people. They're paying Res A, which is in some cases 3 times as much. That's pretty much a yes or no.
I think I maybe can be of help at this point.
Okay. Is there something we can do for these people?
Can I introduce myself?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so
I know who you are.
Yeah, no, but bear with me a few seconds. So, good afternoon at this point, past noon, Budget Chair, Budget Vice Chair, and welcome and congratulations. Sorry I didn't make it to last week's, and anyway, Stephen Takara, administrator, and maybe I can help out at this point. So to answer your question, I think this is part of Vice Chair Kiaina's resolution last year, where we had the home exemption campaign, where we kind of help out and public outreach, where we make this campaign about the home exemption, because part of what we say is that, yes, we try to educate and inform property owners. In turn, we would like to think that the property owner has an obligation as well to, I guess, be aware of it by us doing the public outreach with community members or groups. We don't know if the property owner resides there or not, right? So there's 270 something thousand residential properties, right? 303,000 properties. So we don't know. We're asking by ordinance, because this is an ordinance, that by definition, without a home exemption, and if it's residential zoning without a home exemption exceeding $1 million, they'll be placed in the residential A classification. Okay, so I think what you're asking is, what can we do for those that didn't file a home exemption? Again, we're trying to follow the law, right? I mean, we had this issue every year, right? 2014 when the inception, 2015, I guess we had some compromises here and there, right? Again, this is why we have the educational campaign about the home exemption, and we're going to do it again next year, or this year for the September 30th deadline.
Can we ask on the form, do you live in the home?
That is a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, as much as, I guess, residential people or properties in the residential classification asking for help, we're asking equally for help that they help us out too. As harsh as it may sound, I feel that the property owner has an obligation as well to inform us as well.
Right. I mean, it comes to that as well, where we're trying to help out widows or widowers who weren't on the homeowner's exemption when their spouse or partner died or someone else in the home died, and they had the homeowner's exemption. They now also have to pay Res A if they don't put themselves on the homeowner's exemption.
Yeah. So,
okay. So is it grounds for appeal, what I've just described, that you actually live in the home, you didn't have a homeowner's exemption, and now, because of rising property values, your home is valued over $1 million, when before it wasn't, so you weren't Res A. Is that grounds for appeal?
well, I think Ms. B spoke about the grounds of appeal. There is, I guess, if they applied for the home exemption and we denied them, I think that's ground 3.
Yeah.
But, usually if we can review back as far as the grounds of appeal, sounds like if they lived there and they didn't let us know, again, how are we supposed to monitor and be informed of that they lived there?
Right.
Is that fair to other people who did timely file and did follow the law? How do we prove that that individual, that property owner resided there at that snapshot in time? I'm sorry, so Chair Waters, I just want to back up.
Yeah.
Because I think it was an issue prior, and you mentioned the surviving spouse. So part of the education campaign, we did encourage all property owners who reside on a property who are on title to file that backup at whatever, right? Mom, dad, brother, or sister, that whoever's entitled to live there, file an application so you have all these backups in case something unforeseen happens where the claimant actually no longer is eligible for that. So you automatically have that backup. So, again, part of the campaign was we asked council members as well to help out, right? So you guys' websites, you guys' social media, so it's a team effort.
No, I agree, and we all need to work together to get the word out. But every year we still get these folks who don't apply for the exemption, and we're just trying to help those guys. And I'm looking at your presentation regarding what grounds for appeal, and it doesn't appear that what I just described is grounds for appeal. Can you explain and whether or not we should change the law regarding the grounds for appeal to include something like this to help out folks who
that's kind of an
so the notice of appeal, there's a checkoff boxes 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe we put number 5, you forgot to file your homeowner's exemption. I'm trying to be as simple as possible, but how do we help folks? Now we're talking when a house that was $700,000 in his district, or $800,000, 20% went up. Now it's $1 million, and their property tax. Let me ask you this: how much will their property tax go up? A person who didn't file a homeowner's exemption that was paying on $800,000. I guess I could do the math myself, but it's significant, right? Res A is what, 3 times as much?
Well, the current tax rate for the current fiscal year, right? So if you're residential, you're paying $350 per thousand. So $1 million, right? We just cut, it's $3,500. So once you Res A, $1.1 million, it's at $450, right? The first million is at $450, so it's $4,500 right there. So there's a difference of $1,000.
Yeah.
So anything in excess of $1 million is at $1050, right? But if you just creep over the $1 million, it's basically $1,000 at that point. So you go, right?
No, this is super helpful for, hopefully people are watching so that they understand how important it is to file for your homeowner's exemption. 2 more quick questions. How do you value a newly built home?
I'm sorry, say it.
A newly built home. Do you still do comps? So there's
Yes.
vacant land and then you build a new home.
Yeah, maybe I might want to call up Mr. Peterson, but basically, we'd look at the, depreciation and probably the sales. We're looking at sales, but maybe I'll have.
So you still do it based on comps.
So, thank you for the question. Did you say a newly built
Newly
home?
built home, yeah.
So it would be the same process as an old home. We would make different types of adjustments because of the age of the home. So all of that is considered in the adjustments that we make. So if we're looking at a newly built home compared to something that might be 10 or 20 years old, we've adjusted for that already. So there would be a difference in the market estimate, and that's our tool for adjusting.
I see. So you don't actually look to see, I mean, I'm making this difficult on purpose. For example, you got on 35 or say 5,000 square foot lot and it's zoned R5. And instead of building a 3-bedroom house, you build one studio. You're going to value that studio the same as a 3-bedroom house that was sold down the street, based on what analysis you just talked about today.
I mean, we would make adjustments if the sizes are different.
Okay.
The square footage, the number of bedrooms, those are all factors that we would make adjustments for.
So that would be the appeal number 2, lack of uniformity or inequality.
Well, I'm not sure if I would say that. If we were valuing a home like the one you described, a studio, I'm not sure how to put this. Exactly like a home that was much bigger with more room, then if you could show that our procedures were inequitable, then maybe ground 2 might be appropriate for that person.
Okay, thank you. And then last question, how long does an appeal take? That was one thing I don't think it was covered in your presentation.
The appeal, it'll depend on the appraiser that handles the appeal. Some appraisers have a backlog from previous years. Some appraisers are completely free of appeals. So it kind of depends on how many they get this year. So if say you appeal your property and the appraiser has 100 appeals to work on this year, it just depends on when they can get it on the agenda.
So the appraiser who did the appraisal does the appeal? We don't have an independent person
Yes.
doing it?
Mhm.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair.
Okay, first up, we have Councilmember Tupola and then Vice Chair Kiaina.
Yeah, just real brief, not a question for the division, but last year we discussed Bill 4, and actually on page 3, it's in ROH section 8-7.1. It discussed the 1 million, and we discussed as a council, and I remember Administrator Takar was there. We all said, what happens when our valuation goes above 1 million? And so it went through second reading, so it's possibly something, and I think, Budget Chair has the discretion on whether or not we really discuss that, because we were kind of in between. Last year when we were discussing it, property tax said, oh, well, we're going to come out and we're not totally sure. Well, now we're all sure it went up. So now we should be very, I think, mindful that 1 million, especially with the amount of articles that come out, that now the average price of a home is $1 million in Hawaii, where the threshold should be. And I don't know if the administration has a position, but I think knowing their position and then knowing what we're going to do, either proceed forward with Bill 4 or maybe create something new, I think something needs to be done. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Tupola. Next up, we have Vice Chair Kiaina.
Thank you. This is for Director Kawano. And thank you for your team for the presentations today. I understand that the informational briefing is broadly worded so that we can talk about the future. And you mentioned that with regard to all of the proposals that are on the books right now in the process, it won't be implemented to fiscal 2025. So first, I guess I want to know, the Oahu Real Property Tax Commission made the report, and I guess I'm hoping that we could have some hearing on actual measures so you can give your mana'o on budgetary estimates and what the administration's policy is, because I believe the people of Oahu deserve it, of all economic classes, but in particular our kupuna and those with lower income. So I guess I want to ask first, are you looking at all of the measures? And are you going to be prepared when a hearing is held to be articulating the administration's proposals first on the buildings that have been introduced, including the vacancy tax, right? Not just the real property tax exemption and credits. And also, perhaps because it's a couple of years away, do you believe that the administration could look at ways to provide immediate relief for real property tax owners? Two-part question.
For the first part of the question, we've gone through all of the Oahu Real Estate Tax Commission's recommendations, and we have the analysis. The one that's really tough is the low-income tax credit legislation, because it's difficult to determine how much of a larger net increasing, let's say, the income threshold from $60,000 to $70,000, what kind of impact it would have, right? Because everyone's income can fluctuate year to year. For instance, a lot of retirees, probably more likely than not, I don't know the exact answer. 2022, they probably on their tax returns will either recognize or report less income on investments or losses, because 2022 was a really rough year for most people. Therefore, their income may have been brought down and they may qualify. But come a more normal year, be it 2023, 2024, maybe they won't qualify, depending on what that limit is. So that one's hard to determine. But in terms of homeowners exemption, we could probably come up with guidance on, what the ranges could be, per 10,000 or 20,000 or whatnot. And then we can, there are a lot of exemptions that were discussed. And I don't have the number off the top of my head, but there are many exemptions that people benefit from that, reduce our tax collections. So I know we're going to have to talk about those as well, and we've analyzed those. And I want to thank, we have had discussion with Budget Chair Say from last year on, the commission's report as well. So very helpful to have that. So we'll be ready. In terms of your second part of the question on something that we can do immediately, I'm thinking about a one-time tax credit, perhaps. We can implement it perhaps on the Treasury side, not real property assessments, but on the Treasury side as a reduction on the bill. But we need to have the discussion and talk it through, because depending on the base of people we're looking at, the amount of the credit will vary, right? So if we include all homeowners, we're talking 150,000 plus, let's just say 150,000 households. So, if we increase it, if we provide a credit of just a small amount, $100, that's $100 is already $15 million of less general fund revenue to pay for services. So that's that's what we have to talk about, those variables. And but we're not there yet. We're focused right now to balance the budget, and such that we can propose a balanced budget come March, early March.
Thank you for that. I just would recommend, however, that you, when you present the budget, if you're going to consider the credit, that you factor that cost into your presentation of the budget.
We will, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kiaina. Okay, thank you to the Real Property team for being here. I do have I never say POW yet.
Chair has a few questions. Sorry. Okay, so first off, going back to the actual appeals, I know that you said, so what have you all said, that it was around the same amount of appeals as previous years,
To
yeah?
date, but things can change quickly, so I'll let our administrator update you on that.
Okay, what to date, how many have we received?
As of last Friday, we were just under 500.
Just under 500,
Yeah.
okay. And normally, does the window happen between, like, since, it's January 15, and of course, we know that we have a holiday on, like, January 16. So how do we deal with that, like, holiday window?
Yeah, the weekend rule does not apply
Okay,
by ordinance.
okay.
Our interpretation and confirmation from CORE that the weekend rule does not apply for the appeal process or the Board of Review appeals.
Okay. And regarding the amount of with the rest of the team that are handling the appeals, from the appraisers to just everyone working the phone line, how many people are tasked at that? Because, we're just coming out of the holiday season. People are probably still on holiday, holiday time, coming back from holidays. Like, how is it, I guess, managing the time off to the appeal process time? Do you need more? Are you looking to hire more people? You get enough.
What? Trying to digest.
Ms. B says no.
Okay, so I think the appropriate response is that we take this 30-day window very seriously, right?
Okay.
We make ourselves available to the public, all these questions and whatnot. So we basically have a phone bank, a dedicated staff. So staff, like as Ms. B mentioned, that we have dedicated staff to answer the phones primarily or focused on appeal questions or valuation questions, property records, assessment, to answer the phones. And then those are, I guess, disseminated to appraisers or the appropriate person that's responsible or could answer yes, no, or why decisions were made. Appraisers are available, staff's available, we're available. We have media inquiries. So again, we take this very seriously, or I take this very seriously, because this is the largest revenue source for the city, and I think it deserves equal attention and care.
Absolutely. And so I understand it was mentioned that some appraisers, some of their appraisals that or appeals that they're working with go back a few years too. And so are we not able to determine or work on appeals that come in, like just this week, let's say, like immediately as we get it?
We try to expedite the process. What I was gonna add to Mr. Peterson's comment about appeal process, or Ms. B's, is that we ask for, I guess, supporting documentation from the appellant. Okay, so please remember that the burden of proof resides on the appellant. That if you're aggrieved on one of the four grounds, then you the burden of proof resides on the appellant, that you have to prove that we were off by 10%, we're inequitable, we wasn't, fair, and we wrongfully denied the exemptions and so forth. Okay, so supplying our office with such data supporting evidence helps expedite scheduling. Right, so if everything's in line, everything, so that helps our scheduling and closure, or I guess adjudication of appeal cases. So we ask for that, and we want that off our books as well. So equally, appellants and taxpayers want to settle. We also want to equally find remedy to the situation.
So since, there's some appraisers have like a number of appeals that they're dealing with from a few years ago, we don't really know how much we approve and deny per year then, yeah?
We do supply a report. I think when you say approve or deny, meaning prevail, who prevails, is that what we're asking?
I guess.
Yeah. So I guess,
don't know.
so part of it, maybe I look at everybody is that, okay, we have different terminologies that I guess we're asking people to digest it as well as utilize, or we ask for verification. Okay, so in our world, right, so we say adjudicate or settle the case, or we offer a stipulation, judgment, or, so the appellant or taxpayer appeals, he becomes an appellant, he or she becomes an appellant. If board or there's a stip in their favor, they get the $50 back. Records kind of show, trends show over the years, maybe about 30%. I don't know if that's what you're asking for, the success rate of the appellant, or should I not have said it? I don't know, is that what you're asking?
No, I was just wondering. Since a few appraisers are dealing with a few appeals at a time, and then not all of it goes to a certain point. You don't really have a certain data from just how many appeals were either prevailed or not. Within particular years, because some probably go into the next year.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was asking.
Yeah, and I think what Mr. Peterson was saying was that dependent upon, because I guess the person who valued or denied or made the decision to cause it the appeal or aggrieved, depends on how many, let's say, like along the North Shore. We get an influx of North Shore properties that appeal. That appraiser has that much more appeals, so realistically, then it may take a little bit longer to process, versus another place that has less amount of appeals. I don't know. Hopefully, I'm trying to get on the same page.
No, thank you. All that information does help, Mr. Takara. That's it for my questions, members. Oh, okay. Councilmember Say.
Yeah, just 2 questions. Is there a possibility that was a request from a senior citizen that I could pay my bills quarterly rather than, a senior citizen from the district requested that if she could pay her bills quarterly?
Yeah, that might be a director level.
Because of the increased assessments, we thought that to alleviate her financial concerns, quarterly rather than,
Okay, so I've been told by my team that when we implemented the, I guess the four payment, we didn't do it quarterly, but it was 4 payments, right? So the first bill can be paid in 4 installments, second bill was paid in 4 installments. That happened during the lockdown, and we could do it again. There is a cost. If I recall right, it's just at about $100,000, for overtime and for the mail-out costs to residents. But, in terms of, the concern out there, that's probably immaterial. So we can look at that. But we've only done it when there was the complete lockdown. So that's historically, that's what we have to compare it against. Yeah.
And then my final question, in trying to maybe be fair and equitable for those homes that are maybe 30 years old, can we look at going after those new homes, the new replacement value market homes? Because today it's going to be easy, $1 million to $1.5 million for just replacing a home. So my thoughts is that we just go after that based on the building permit. It's something for the department to consider, but I can see how the formula is, right? The top 2, the low 2, and then you just go with the 3 inside. But when you have a new home, that value compared to the neighbor's home, as far as the improvement differential, would be so great. So I was thinking, can we not just spot zone? Just go at DPP, get all the permits that they're building new homes, and the replacement value will be over $500,000 to whatever, compared to what the assessed mass appraisal was. And it's just food for thought.
Yeah, I'll discuss that with the administration, and I thought Stuart did a good job.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Chair, Budget, Councilmember Say, we kind of factor that in when we go through the process of doing those market adjustments. And the computer system helps to identify the comparable sales data that we use for the valuation. So yeah, some of that is kind of done already, but we'll have discussion on that, and we can report back next time we have a briefing.
Thank you very much. And I also really want to thank you all. I want to thank especially Mr. Peterson and Ms. B, and of course Administrator Takara for answering the questions as best you could. And thank you, Director Kawano, for working with us, with our committee to have this. With that, I will now move on to registered testifiers. We have Natalie Iwasa.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for having this discussion. Natalie Wassa, for the record. I submitted written testimony late last night, and I'm not sure you had time to look at it, but I wanted to point out a few things. The residential A net valuations have increased about 242% from the time that classification was implemented, and compared to residential properties, they only increased 54%. So, something needs to be done about this classification and the taxes that are likely going to be assessed to these properties. I looked at the house that I live in, and compared to what my landlord would be paying, he's going to be paying over 90% more than what I would pay if I owned my home. And that's almost $8,000, assuming the rates are the same next year. Now that's over, 2 months of rent. It's obscene. The city cannot do everything, and it's really important to recognize this. As business owners, household people who run a household know that they can't do it all. I just have a few more points, if I may, Chair, because this is so important. I'm asking the council to remove certain exemptions that cost us millions of dollars every year, and you've heard me say that before. It's good to know that the administration has analyzed those exemptions, and I ask that you have a very thorough discussion on them. With respect to the comp sales report that the administration pointed to that is available, they want to charge renters a fee to get that same report, and renters have a vested interest in that report so that they can point out to their landlords potentially that they might want to file an appeal. This is important, and it's not fair to charge renters a fee. I also wanted to point out that for every $100,000 in the residential aid, going from 1 million to 1.1 million, is a 10% increase, but it's a 23% increase in the real property taxes. It is outrageous. And then lastly, with respect to the tax credit that was mentioned, the one-time tax credit of potentially $100. Typically, those tax credits don't apply to rental properties. And this, I think, is where we are going to have a huge problem in the future. We're going to have federal funding that's going to dry up, and we're going to see many more landlords increasing their rent because they can't afford to pay the taxes. So this whole system needs to be reviewed, and I ask you to please look at that very carefully when you talk about the budget, and then going forward, changing the law with respect to these exemptions and other parts of the system that we have in place. Thank you so much for allowing me to go a little bit over the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Iwasa. Do we have any other testifiers, remote testifiers? Okay, Gigi Zhang.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and the Budget Committee. I'm just testifying to provide comments about the appeals process. And I think that the appeal process should be provided so that citizens and constituents can have a fair hearing throughout the procedures. And for it to be implemented through the administrative rules, I think it's going to be something that creates a fair opportunity for citizens. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gigi Zhang. Okay, do we have any other remote testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, are there any in-person testifiers?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to testify? Okay, seeing none, members, we are in discussion. I know we had a lot of discussion already and questions, but with that, thank you all for taking the time to ask questions, and hope we can all provide the same assistance and outreach for the deadline, for the appeals deadline, I should say. With that, there being no further business, the meeting is adjourned.